What's up, everybody? Nothing like some technical difficulties to get us started out on the right foot. Let me know if you can hear me. Having some mic issues to start the day, but it seems like everything's working now. And we have a really interesting set of videos today. Yes, we are going to watch the interview or an interview. I watched two, but this one has a lot of stuff, and I'll kind of add in tidbits from the other one that I watched and of Becky Hill, the clerk of court on the Murdaugh case, who is the subject of the Murdaugh team's motion for a new trial. And number two, we are also going to watch the interview that I think is newish from Court TV with her co-author on the book, so that we can see what he has to say about it. And this is coming after the allegations. So we get some more context and we get some more understanding as far as what did she know? What did she reveal to him? When did she start planning this book idea? So to me, all of that creates really good context for us and new information that we didn't have when we read the motion, when we read the affidavits, that can help us understand what did she know at the time? Is there merit to this stuff? I also went back and watched, which we're not going to play today, but I'll just summarize it. I went and watched when the egg juror lady was dismissed. Judge Newman did say it had nothing to do with her ex-husband's Facebook post. Judge Newman did say in the transcript that he did not like the idea of the clerk of court interrogating a juror. It should have just been brought to him. But that after interviewing other people in her life, that he came to the decision that she was talking about the case, which is obviously inappropriate, and that's why she had to be removed. Now, what's interesting is Harpootlian also made arguments that SLED did those interviews, and Judge Newman used words like they waffled back and forth on whether or not she said anything, but it does sound like she had mentioned some evidence up to that point. So here's the point. There was a lot of back and forth and information about this juror before she was dismissed. And the question is, did the interaction with the clerk of court and did any action made by or suggestion or recommendation made by the clerk of court influence Judge Newman's decision to dismiss this juror? So those are all things we got to keep in the back of our head. And we have context and we're going to hear from both sides. That's why I do want to hear from Becky Hill. I don't want her to testify or give any statements if she has counsel now and they're telling her to remain silent. So her interview is from before all this happening. But I am very interested in what she has to say. I'm very interested in what her co-author has to say so that we can start to get more of a full picture as opposed to just one side of the story of what they think happened. Because they made a big deal about those Facebook posts, and Judge Newman did in fact say she is not getting dismissed because of those Facebook posts. So that's maybe knocking down one of their arguments or removing one of the bullets from their chamber. So let's get into it. Hit that like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to our page if you haven't already. And we are going to jump in to the first interview, which is, we can see on the screen when this happened. All right. So this is on Fitz News. And it is from, I don't know. This is from right after the trial. All right, here we go.
Excited today. We've got a wonderful conversation today with somebody who was at the very center of the double homicide trial of Alec Murdaugh down in the low country of South Carolina back in March of this year. This trial made international headlines, focus of international attention, and handling it all with amazing grace. The clerk of court from Colleton County, Miss Becky Hill. Becky, thank you for being with us today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Now, I've got to ask you this, Madam Clerk. Can we dispense with the formalities? And can I call you Miss Becky?
Can we please do that? Thank you, Will. Thank you.
Excellent. Because during the 6 weeks of that trial, you were Miss Becky running that show. And again, just the integrity, the way you ran that trial from start to finish, you and your crew. I'm sure you're still getting plaudits, but it was just amazing.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, have things gotten back to normal in the borough since this trial?
I don't think we really know what normal is. They say it's just a setting on the dryer. I'm beginning to believe that's about true.
Well, how's everybody doing? I mean, your family's well, your beautiful daughter, Aubrey, everybody's doing well?
We are all doing well. My daughter is doing great. She's singing. She's gotten a lot of gigs and she's got a little group together and they sang at the Water Festival in Beaufort here recently and doing great. My husband, awesome. Tommy, is doing wonderful. Trying to be retired, but I keep him busy. And my son and his wife and 2 children doing great.
That's wonderful. And the town, we had such a wonderful experience in Walterboro. Not just you, your staff, the sheriffs, but all the businesses there, the food trucks. Everybody's so welcoming. What a great community.
Thank you. I'm glad that you had that experience because that's what we wanted to provide.
Well, it was a difficult situation, but you guys absolutely did your jobs and put the best foot forward, as you said you would do before the trial. But Becky, I want to ask you, a lot of folks are writing books about the Murdaugh saga and about various aspects of it, but your book, which is coming out, tell me when it's coming out again, so I'll make sure I know that date.
August 1st is our due date. It's already out
So
on
right
Amazon.
around the corner.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it is on Amazon.
Well, I was lucky enough to get a sneak peek of it, and I got to ask you first two questions really. When did the idea come to you to write this, and how did you get it done so quickly?
Thinking back, I think that
So that is the first major question. The pleasantries are out of the way, and now we're getting into the real stuff. Why did you write the book, and when did you have the first idea?
idea came from a historical point of view because we knew that this was such a trial that would be different from anything that we had ever experienced, and it would be on a worldwide stage. I think the seed was planted back before the trial.
So that's my first issue with this interview. They knew this trial was going to be historic, number one. And number two, the seed was planted before the trial. So if I'm the defense team, right, which is how I'm kind of listening to this interview to see how I would use this old interview. Yes, this is an old interview post-trial, but we're listening to see if she gave any indication of impropriety with what we know now from the jurors' affidavits that the defense filed. So the fact that the seeds were planted before the trial, that she was thinking about writing a book on this because of the historical significance that this book was going to have, that's going to be part of the discussion for sure.
And did I really think that I would write a book? I think the thinking was there, but then I happened to meet some people that kind of put feet to the dream, so to speak.
And I'll back it up so we can listen to it again. Did I think I was really going to write the book? I think the dream was there. So she could have said, did I really think I was going to write a book? No. But once the trial happened, I was like, all right, this is too good. I have to write a book. But instead, before the trial, the seed was planted, and she did have a dream to write a book.
We had ever experienced, and it would be on a worldwide stage. I think the seed was planted back before the trial. And did I really think that I would write a book? I think the thinking was there, but then I happened to meet some people that kind of put feet to the dream, so to speak. And that was at the very end of the trial when I met these people. And it took us 4.5 months to write this book, which is a very, very, very fast way to write a book. Some people take 4.5 years, I've been told. But I worked.
I would take 4.5 decades and maybe never get it done.
I have certainly enjoyed writing and writing my first book. I've always loved reading, writing, and from the time that I was a child. So I would pretend when I was a child that I was a newscaster of all things. And I'd put the newspaper in front of me and pretend I was on Channel 5 with Charlie Hall. But you have to be from the Low Country to know about Charlie Hall. He was an icon.
Let me ask you this question. One of the things that struck me in reading your book was the insight you had into that jury. It was almost
one of the things that struck him after reading the book, and again, this was months ago, before any of the affidavits came out, before anybody said there was jury tampering, before anybody said there were inappropriate conversations, private conversations, that she had any effect over the jury at all. A fan of hers, or I'm not saying he's a fan. He's being polite. I would be the same way with her if she came on my show after the trial and did this interview. So no condemnation on him at all. But I think somebody who has a positive view of her, right, and is not like paid off by the Murdaughs or anything like that, right? That's all I'm going to say about this host. He says what was fascinating to him was the insight she had into that jury. His first takeaway about the book. I think I'm just pointing it out. I think that's interesting. And that's something I'd point out if I was the defense. I want to back it up so we can hear him say it one more time.
Oh, he was an icon.
Let me ask you this question. One of the things that struck me in reading your book was the insight you had into that jury. It was almost like you knew from the very beginning what they were thinking. And remember, a lot of folks don't know this, but Alec Murdaugh picked that jury himself, didn't he?
He did.
It seemed like you knew what they were thinking.
Defendants sometimes get the chance to do that. Sometimes they exercise their right to do that. And Alec Murdaugh certainly did use his right to pick his own jury. My daughter almost was on the jury as well.
Oh, wow. That would have been some insight.
That would have been a totally different story.
You wrote in your book, though, about sometimes juries come together, sometimes they don't. But you wrote that this jury was almost like a family. I mean, they were so close. Tell us a little bit about how those relationships developed and how they evolved over the course of the trial.
They bonded immediately from the time that they met back in the room, and they were all picked together on Tuesday of January. And they were prayerful. I believe I say this in my book. They were very perceptive, and they were just a pack. They stayed together. They treated each other like family. I could tell just from talking to the jurors about daily things, nothing about the trial at all. But I've been around a jury for a long time, different juries for a long time, and you get to know the layout of a jury, and just you can get a feel from how juries are going to be. And I learned that this jury, they were tight. They started every morning out with prayer. They were very watchful. They were very perceptive in the things that they were listening to, the things they were watching during the trial, especially when we went to Moselle at the very end of the trial. That was very telling. And just by observation, I knew that.
So the visit to Moselle is something they bring up a lot. This interview, another interview I watched with her where that's where the jurors made up their mind, was at Moselle. Defense thought it was a good idea, but it wasn't. Ha ha. And then again, we're going to hear more about that with her co-author. So that trip to Moselle, I think, is going to be a big topic of discussion. Was she pulling someone aside? Was she talking to people individually? Would that be breaking the rules?
The verdict was already pretty sealed when we went to Moselle. There wasn't going to take much, and I knew it wasn't going to take long for them to come to a decision about a verdict.
I knew it wasn't going to take long for them to come to a decision on the verdict. And if I'm the defense, I might say something like, is that because you didn't give them smoke breaks? Is that because you threatened them? And I'm going to put air quotes here, that they had to go stay at a hotel that they weren't prepared for. She's giving the defense a lot to argue in this interview. Again, this interview's old. He's not baiting her. Somebody asked, this is old, but I'm just saying, I do think she's giving the defense something to argue. Now, if I'm the state, she makes no admissions about talking to jurors throughout this, or the AG's office, no admissions of any impropriety. She basically says the jury was like a family. They prayed together. They were nice. They were tight. She knew they were going to come together and agree on this stuff. So nothing specifically wrong with what she's saying in this interview. And it's all got to have, parts and connect the dots of making arguments for the defense. So that's what I would say. Just trying to say how both sides would think about it.
Let me ask you about that field trip. That's one of the most baffling parts of this trial. It was requested by the defense attorneys. They felt that it would show logistically that Alec Murdaugh couldn't have committed the crimes of which he was convicted. But you said in the book that that was what sealed his fate. That it actually worked against Murdaugh. Tell us about that.
It did. The defense attorneys thought that it was going to be used in their favor. That's why I think they requested it, and Judge Newman granted it. So when we were out there on the property and walking side by side, there was hardly any conversation, no talking at all. And everyone was doing their
hardly any conversation and no talking at all is different, but walking side by side. My first thought is, how would she know that the Moselle visit was positive for the state and negative for the defense? How would she know that? How would she know that that was a linchpin? Now, we saw jury interviews, and maybe it's from that. And I'd reference that if I was her, that, we heard the interviews of the jurors and they said that was really important. To me, the recording at the kennel was the thing that shone through in most of the interviews as the biggest piece of evidence condemning Alec Murdaugh. But she seems to think it was the visit to Moselle.
Own measurements in their own way. They were walking things out, I think, going over in their mind what they had heard throughout the trial and putting it all together. It was very heavy out there that day, seeing all the jurors contemplating and in thought of what they were looking at and seeing with their own eyes. I don't think that the defense attorneys thought it would go that way.
And this is where I throw in and remember, Judge, she said, don't be fooled by this, or don't listen to their arguments for that. That's where I throw it in that, oh, you guys thought this was going to work one way, but it actually worked the other.
Well, and by that time in the trial, obviously, they were subject matter experts, not only on the Murdaughs, not only on all the ancillary crimes of which Alec Murdaugh stood accused, but of that crime scene. I mean, they had heard by that point weeks of testimony about what transpired on the ground they were walking. And Becky, you said they were silent, they were stoic. As you watched them at Moselle, and you said that Alec Murdaugh's fate was sealed, what was it that you saw in their faces that led you to that conclusion?
They were extremely serious. They knew that the decisions they were making was going to be life-changing for this person named Alec Murdaugh. They were serious about what they were doing because they knew that the verdict was going to be a heavy one to hand out. I feel like, but in their faces, it was almost as if they knew that they were going to have to come down with a verdict of guilty, because to them, the evidence was there.
To them, the evidence was there. I mean, I guess I could say that. I could surmise that based on their verdict. I'm going to hit a couple questions here to break up the video a little bit. So Patty P said, whatever, the egg juror had no say in the verdict. While this is true, what's interesting is, and that's why I asked the question, did the clerk influence, or anything she brought to the table influence this juror getting booted? Because if so, maybe it was this clerk's fault that egg juror had no say in the verdict. And then again, this is where we start to get down the fact that we might need a new trial here. Cincinnati, hot dang, I made it live. So glad you're covering this, Peter. I look forward to your videos daily. Love your perspective and non-biased expertise. Thank you, Cincinnati Paw Nerd. Jonathan, I called this during the trial. We all felt the fishiness, especially when the jurors were talking, whether AM have taken the stand or not, when most jurors want to hear from the defense and don't get to. I mean, there was indications all over the place of issues. I'm interested too in how much SLED was involved in checking the jurors and what the clerk of the court was doing and things like that. Daria, Peter, can you do a poll? Should she have written a book so soon after, yes or no? Sure. John, will you throw up a poll? Should she have written a book so soon after? We can do a book. I mean, a poll. We're not going to do a book. Bev, what's up? Peter, 2 questions. 1, are court clerks in all states elected rather than appointed? I thought it was an administrative position. Do you think the court knew she was penning a book, approved it? I don't know what Judge Newman knew. I also don't know if it's an elected official everywhere. I would think it is. But I don't know the answer. A lot of people ask, what is a court clerk's job? Basically, it's the judge's right-hand person, helps run the courtroom, handle the evidence, handle the exhibits, make sure it's tagged appropriately, set up lunch if the jury's going to get lunch or meals or hotels or things like that, but never discussing their feelings on the case, never discussing evidence with the jury, never discussing which way any jurors are leaning and trying to get jurors on or off juries. That just doesn't happen, or shouldn't. Baby Gator, I feel like she should have waited on the book until she was no longer the clerk. Seems like a conflict while she holds the office. I mean, if I was a criminal defense attorney there and I had a defendant, I'd be like, Judge, I don't want this clerk here. She's going to write a book about my client's case after. It's interesting. Ellen, SLED has been in Colleton County investigating this since last week. Effectively, do you think they can cover up what they did wrong with detaining the egg jurors' renters? Do you think they are trying to CYA? So I don't want to say that about law enforcement. I usually like to give law enforcement the benefit of the doubt. But what I will say is I don't trust their investigation when it comes to Murdaugh at this point. So I'm kind of with the defense that I think the FBI or somebody else should jump in and investigate this and find the truth. And I also think that if these jurors that signed affidavits come and testify, I think we're going to get down to the bottom of it. Inevitably honest, Peter, do you think this is going to be used against her? Yes, I do. Pole's friend, fined, prison. So what's interesting is Murdaugh's team wrote a letter to federal prosecutors and the FBI to investigate her, and some of the federal crimes around jury tampering and obstruction of someone's justice and due process can go from a felony charge up to 5 years in prison, all the way up to charges that, if you're convicted, can have a maximum sentence of 20 years in federal prison. So these are very serious actions. Cheswick, please do a poll to assess competency. I'm not sure. You mean her competency? Miss T, I don't see how the book would be motive to sway the jury to guilty. I kind of agree with that. People would be more likely to buy the book if AM was acquitted, or even a hung jury, right? There's intrigue, maybe a second book. So I do agree that, that's not necessarily motive to push him to guilty, but it seems like some of her conversations, the content and jurors that she maybe, if it's true, tampered with to get removed, were leaning not guilty or not sure yet. And the comments she made were negative toward the defense. So maybe it was just her personal feeling, but I agree. I don't think guilty hurts or helps book sales. I could be wrong about that. Alice, her behavior seems wildly inappropriate to me. Even just the book and going to NYC with the jurors, those facts alone make me uncomfy, and then add everything else. Trish, see how she know the verdict was locked before Moselle? That's a great question, Trish. And I think if she was put on the stand and they asked her that question, she would say, oh, I could just tell it wasn't from any conversations. Izzy is always excited to hear my perspective. Thank you, Izzy. D-Trug. Peter, in the interest of fairness, does testimony always match a witness affidavit? No, it does not. And we've seen in Koberger, like, that expert witness now may be changing her testimony, not after an affidavit, but also testifying in court. So sometimes it does happen. Depots, what they say in depots sometimes changes as well. Following your mantra, innocent till proven guilty, things might be testified in court differently. I agree. It's why I keep saying, if proven, if true, allegedly, these allegations. I try my best to keep that language because that's what it is. Why was she even at Moselle with the jurors? She helps control the process and make sure everything's in order, set up the buses, probably the schedule, tell the jurors, walk single file down here, make sure, the cameras don't get you and none of the public sees you. She would be involved in those logistics, usually. Diane, I thought the jury wasn't allowed to talk to each other about the trial at Moselle. They weren't. They're not supposed to discuss their verdicts or where they feel about the verdict or what they think about the evidence until they get in the deliberation room. Seems like based on the affidavits that they did do that, throughout the trial. Chell CD, SLED's reputation is questionable here in South Carolina. Yeah, I can see that. All right, back to the interview.
It was obviously a circumstantial case, but an overwhelming amount of circumstantial evidence pointing to the guilt of Alec Murdaugh. Becky, let's talk about the verdict in that moment. I remember being in the courtroom that night, seeing you walk by with a look on your face like it was about to happen, but you knew. You were one of the few people.
A look on your face like it was about to happen?
Kept hearing from all these national observers that it would be weeks, that it would take forever for one of the few. Seeing you walk by.
I'm going to back it up because he makes a comment like, you knew. Everybody else was saying this was going to take forever, but you knew that this was going to be a quick verdict. And again, this is harmless without the context of the motion and the jury affidavits that we got before. On its own, this is harmless. Like, oh, you had a hunch, like how I guess. It's like, oh, Peter, you guessed it right the day you got the verdict. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. That's awesome. But with context of maybe you were talking to the jurors, maybe you were pressuring the jurors, not having smoke breaks, threatening them, sending them to a hotel. I say threatening like it was some kind of like nefarious thing. I don't mean that. I mean just telling them if you don't do it quick, this is what awaits you. So maybe she did more than just know the verdict was coming soon. Maybe. And I'm just saying, again, does this line up with what the defense is arguing? This is somebody who I think is not trying to trick or trap Becky, but is just asking her questions and complimenting her for knowing and being right about how quick the verdict would be when everybody on the outside thought it might take a long time.
With a look on your face like it was about to happen, but you knew. You were one of the few people. We kept hearing from all these national observers that it would be weeks, that it would take forever for this jury to reach a verdict, and that they may not, in fact, reach a verdict. But you, from the beginning, had a sense of what was really going to happen. Were you surprised at how fast it was?
I was not surprised. It's called that sense, or a woman's gut. It's called that sixth sense that you may have. I was very in tune with, from watching the jury, that's something that TV watchers did not have the ability to see. But those of us that were in the courtroom, we could watch the jury, we could watch their body language, we could see their faces and what expressions they had. And from hearing the different witnesses that were on the stand, we could tell that, how in tune they were with each witness. And I just felt like, even though it was a lot of circumstantial evidence, they were able to put it all together and come up with the verdict that they got, and they got it right.
Well, let me ask you about that moment. Probably one of the most watched, most anticipated, probably for you, very stressful moments. But the moment when you read that verdict, I remember being in the courtroom, I was thinking to myself, how is she doing this? I mean, you'd been working yourself and your staff no sleep for weeks, and here you are at this just incredibly important moment, the apex of this case, reading out the verdict. Becky, what was that moment like for you?
It was epic. I have worked with Alec Murdaugh.
I don't like to downplay or be condescending or not think that people's jobs are important and things like that. But the clerk of court reading the verdict shouldn't be something that they, think is epic or is some like great shining moment of their job, because you're not supposed to produce that verdict. You as the clerk of court don't win or lose. I understand wanting justice and feeling good that justice prevailed. I think that is good, but like, it was an epic moment that you got to read the verdict in a case you called historic, that seeds were planted to write a book beforehand. That's a little something that's uncomfy in me. Leanne G, when was this interview? This was before her book came out, right after the trial, long ago, not since the allegations came out. I see some people saying, hey, you might want to remain silent. Yeah, well, this is pre-accusation. Credence and Mikey, happy to be here. Bay. Brianna, bearing in mind this is a small town, isn't it possible she knows the jury's mind simply because she knows them her entire life? Sure. Same thing why she could have connections to the Murdaugh family on the victim side or on Alec Murdaugh's side. I don't know. A lot of things are possible. Ellen, whether he's guilty or not, many people agree it wasn't proven beyond a shadow of a doubt by the prosecution. So it doesn't need to be a shadow of a doubt. And I know this is semantics, but it's a reasonable doubt, not a shadow of a doubt. A shadow of a doubt is actually not enough. And that is not an appropriate way for a criminal defense lawyer to make the argument, closing argument. I know you didn't mean it that way, but just as a teaching and learning moment, there is case law that if you say the burden is beyond a shadow of a doubt, that is improper as a defense attorney. But yeah, beyond a reasonable doubt is what they had to prove the case. Some people thought they did. Some people thought they didn't. This jury obviously thought they did. And this clerk.
Murdaugh and some of the other Murdaugh men in the courtroom before. And I knew them on the other side of justice. I had been with them when we were all together on the side of right. And now here I was having to give the verdict of a lifetime and to read it out for Alec. It was heartbreaking. It was something that I never thought I'd have to say out loud. It was very heavy.
A lot of heaviness in this case. And one of the other things I noted in your book, Becky, the way that you talked about the Murdaugh family and the really the compassion that comes through those pages for some of the members of his family who were there in the courtroom every day. And you could really feel, that relationship that you've had with them over the years and how hard that must have been. Becky, what do you think in the aftermath of this case? There was so much at stake here, really, for justice in South Carolina, for the victims in this case. But as you look at the outcome of this, the aftermath of this trial, what has stood out to you as being significant or making an impact on you and as you continue to do your job for the justice system down there in the South Carolina Low Country?
Well, I believe that justice was done, and I believe that the jury showed that it's not all about who you are, and it's the crime. If you commit the crime, you're going to be found out, and that justice will be served. I thought it was very, very telling that it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It sounds to me like the days of old are gone as far as things that happen. Right is right and wrong is wrong, and it was time to pay.
It was indeed. And Becky, I got to say, the folks down there in Colleton, the jury pool that you winnowed through over that period at the beginning of the trial, all the folks there that helped oversee that trial, you guys were the ones that delivered that justice. And it was an amazing thing to watch.
What? You guys are the ones that delivered that justice? No, they're not. Again, I don't mean to harp on it. This guy seems awesome. Seems like a good dude doing these interviews. I don't know him at all. But the clerk of court does not deliver justice, period, at all, ever. They protect everyone's rights and make sure it's a fair process and trial in the courtroom. That's their job. Frankly, they're supposed to be one of the lines of defense and gatekeeper of the jury to make sure no outside forces are influencing the jury. She does not bring justice or fight for justice.
There's a lot of books coming out on this. Obviously, we've been seeing tweets and and web pages with all this, but Becky, yours is the only one that really has this front row seat, this inside the minds really of those jurors, and as this was happening. So just an incredibly unique perspective behind the walls of justice, the doors of justice. I'm sorry, behind the doors of justice.
Right.
It's available on Amazon, and we're going to put the page up here where you can access it. Tell us about your co-author on this real quick, Becky.
Sure.
All right, this is perfect. Okay, so we're going to hear about her co-author, and then we're going to watch his interview. All right.
Somebody.
Sure. Neil Gordon is the co-author, and his wife, Melissa Gordon, is the photographer who took so many pictures even before I had met her. And you can go to www.augustabusinessdaily.com, and it's very easy access to the website for Amazon because our book is now on Amazon. Neil is a fellow journalist and former newscaster, and he has been such a treasure in helping me co-write this book.
That is awesome. Behind the Doors of Justice by Becky Hill. And Neil Gordon. Becky, thank you so much for joining us. We got to get back down there to the borough soon.
All right. So that is video number 1. And let me bring up now video number 2 with her co-author. From Court TV, let me hit a couple questions here first. Emily B., why is she referring to her and the jurors as we and us? She isn't a juror. She shouldn't be talking to herself as a juror. Other people have said they're uncomfortable with this. Again, I think this can be used against her. I'll just say now, we and us were all in the courtroom. We and us all saw all the evidence. We and us felt it was heartbreaking and heavy. That stuff is fine. But when you look at the evidence and know about how quickly it was going to be and don't believe him and things like that, there are ways that, and what we saw at Moselle and how we felt at Moselle, those are more problematic. She's the ultimate clout chaser, retrial granted, misbehaving. Not yet. We're going to have to see. It's a long way still before then. There's going to be an evidentiary hearing, arguments made, maybe testimony. Terry Fuller, her timeline doesn't add up with when the book came to fruition. Even what her co-author claims differs from her own timeline. We'll have to line those up eventually. Sue, any chance that Becky was always secretly working for the Murdaugh team? I've heard this. One of the guys that works on my videos is like, what are the chances Murdaugh actually paid her? Could have paid the jurors. I heard that one yesterday, but what are the chances that they actually paid her? Well, I think it could have been even more obvious. And again, this is potentially a serious federal crime. And is she willing to do that for money from the Murdaughs? I don't know. I mean, it's a question. I'd be surprised. Derek, is she liable for AM second trial legal fees? No, but that's interesting. I mean, I guess he could file some kind of motion that she screwed it up, but if you're convicted and you're a criminal defendant and it gets overturned and you get a second trial, usually the court's not awarding you attorney's fees. I do understand this stuff is expensive, and I agree it's really unfair that she did this, but I think in order to get that, he'd have to prove, maybe if he wins the second trial, then he can sue her for attorney's fees for the first trial because he can prove that what she did changed the outcome, or at least have some kind of proof. But at this point, I'm not so sure he'd be able to prove that. She seems very satisfied with herself, Kat Yarb said. Nalas, looking back now, should the defense have pushed more for the change of venue since small town? Maybe they'll push again for it. I don't know. I think there was a part of them that maybe thought Murdaugh would get a benefit of being in small town. I don't know. Baby Gator, do you think the jurors didn't realize how wrong the actions were because she was the clerk? I think this is a very real possibility. I hate to, say that something is a fact without knowing it from the jurors, but people have been asking, why didn't they point this out? Why didn't they say something sooner? Well, this could answer that question. Kumquat. They didn't even want dinner. Their minds were made up. This is all nonsense. Okay, well, if it was me and the clerk of court did this, I'd be ticked and I'd be demanding a new trial too. Now, I think it's not nonsense. I think we need to figure out if it is true and if it happened. And if it didn't, then it's all nonsense. If it did happen, there needs to be another trial without her. Jonathan, a journalist is a co-author to her book about her job. LOL. Oh my gosh, this is so messed up. I can't believe that. And they totally influenced the jury. Jonathan, let's hear from that journalist who helped her co-write the book.
These allegations are true. I think he's going to get a new trial. I really do. But it's a big if. I've been saying that all night. So let's try to get some balance here tonight. Let's get the other side. Joining us tonight, said there was a co-author here, co-author of Behind the Doors of Justice, the Murdaugh Murders. Neil Gordon is joining us tonight. Neil, great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Vinny.
Okay. But before we get into some real details here, your reaction to what happened today. I called it like an earthquake centered down there in the low country, shaking all of us who followed this case. What's your reaction to what you heard from the defense today?
I was shocked. I worked with Becky for 6 months as both a friend and a colleague on the book. And we've had many discussions in writing the book about any kinds of conversations that she would have had with anybody associated. As Harpootlian mentioned, I mean, she has many different tasks. She's got to work with the judge, the media, the public, dealing with the food, dealing with defense attorneys and so forth. And very little with the jury. I mean, there is a chief bailiff that keeps their eyes on the jury at all times, and there's very little contact.
So in preparing this book, were there any conversations that you had with Becky about conversations she had with jurors during the course of the trial, including the foreperson who the defense is saying there were private conversations, allegations that they're on the Moselle property and they walked off together? They may have had a conversation in the jury room bathroom.
Well, Vinny, all that I know and that we put in the book, you mentioned Moselle. There was an order from the judge for there to be silence. There was no conversation to be had. So I asked her and said no conversation was had. We talked about a couple of different things. If you meet Becky, you know that she's a very spiritual person, and she mentioned that the jury was very prayerful. It was mentioned to her that they prayed often. Becky prayed often with her staff and all. And I asked her directly, I said, did you ever pray with the jury? And she said, oh, no. No legal entity is allowed to have prayer with the jury. So
what I will say about this is, to me, at the very least, this shows she knew. I know this specifically talking about prayer, which is a whole separate legal issue with the jury, but this to me tells us she knows she's not supposed to be discussing certain things with the jury. And I think comments on evidence, on guilt or innocence, all of that, to me, at least proves she knew she should not be doing the things she's accused of. Doesn't mean she did them. And I was going to put NL's comment. So apparently Murdaugh's defense team, with one news conference, has people condemning this lady as guilty of what they say. How fast people forget that AM is shady AF, and so is his team. So here's the only pushback I'll give you here, NL. If it was just his lawyers making these arguments, I think most people would have been incredibly skeptical. But with affidavits with 4 different jury members, 3, I believe, who were there for the actual rendering of the verdict, I think that is what's changing people's minds. The statements made under oath by those jurors, and then Becky Hill's own statements. So I do think it's more than just his lawyers saying something. Animals. My take, she knew AM was guilty and felt justified for impropriety. This is such a common theme when law enforcement does something wrong. It's not because they're bad people, but it's because they think that it's worth it to get the bad guy behind bars, out of the streets. And some people, I think, in the chat would agree with that. But I'm of the ilk of putting one innocent person in prison is not worth it. Rather let a guilty man go free. So, I mean, I can't get behind that, but I understand where people are coming from. Jamie, in Fox documentary, she talks about the reading of the verdict and how she told herself to breathe. It's just another case. Very clear it was not for her. Cora, this must be so heartbreaking for the families and the victims to even think they might have to sit through another trial. Horrifying. For Maggie's family, the Murdaugh family, again, the Murdaugh family is just, it's got to be ripping them up inside, especially the ones that we've heard interviews from that they don't know the truth and they still have doubts, or the ones that now believe it really was their family member who they loved and trusted, and he broke their trust and then did the ultimate wrong to them. This is the victims in cases, criminal or civil, always get the brunt of these things that happen in court. They always get the short end of the stick, regardless of who wins or loses these hearings and trials. Beverly, regarding her being on Murdaugh's side, I don't see it. Someone who's looking to screw with the process is going to assist the jury in finding him not guilty. Helping the jury find him guilty is a huge risk. Your mom's new accountant. This is completely unethical, but I'm not convinced that she has the pull to change the verdict of an entire jury. And I think it's important to comment that this is not the legal standard. She does not have to actually change their votes. If she tampered with the process in a way where she discussed evidence or discussed the case or discussed where they were feeling, that could be enough to get a new trial. They don't have to actually prove she changed it to a guilty verdict. Terry, Polite reminder to people watching this that the co-author doesn't know what Becky did behind closed doors with the jury. And he even says as much. I think he's really careful in what he says. He says, this is what she told me. These are the conversations we had. He doesn't say, I know for a fact she did this or didn't do that. Why is everyone having such an issue with the jury and prayer? Can one not participate in a constitutional right? Sure. There's nothing wrong with the jury praying if they want to pray. Pierre, Murdaugh's lawyers work very hard for being unpaid. I mean, I don't know if it's been confirmed. I've heard that, that's been said. I don't know. They polled the jury. Any jury member could have spoken. Right. And I don't even know for sure that any of the jurors that have a problem with how the clerk acted say that they would vote not guilty. I don't know that they would say that. And I don't know that they have to. I don't think that they have to based on the burden. Patty, with all the corrupt things Murdaugh has done, I don't believe this. Only 2 jurors. No one noticed impropriety. I don't believe a word. And that's fine. But I think that it's at least enough for an evidentiary hearing. Rudy, I can't help but wonder if this is an effort to postpone any focus on the Stephen Smith investigation. It doesn't seem like Buster Murdaugh is a suspect at this point, but I don't know. They've had more convoluted criminal legal issues than any family I've ever known. Alice, question. Possible she was using egg jurors X to try and intimidate her and have her drop out. It didn't work, so she took more steps. She kept bringing him up. It's possible. I don't know that to be true, though. Shady. How likely is it for the defense or Murdaugh clan to get through the witnesses potentially changing tunes through all means necessary post-conviction? I don't know. I don't know the answer to this. I would expect they're going to have their prior testimony that already happened in court to impeach them with. So if they do change their testimony, it's not going to look good for them.
It was very clear to me that there was a line there.
Okay. Now, it's unusual. I've been doing here at Court TV for a long time. I don't know if I've ever seen a book written by the clerk of the court after one of these big trials. I've seen them written by the attorneys on both sides, and sometimes they got in a little trouble for that. I've seen plenty of them written by jurors in states that permit it after a certain amount of time. What was the motivation that Becky had to get together with you to write this book? And was this the master plan before the trial started? Was it plotted that this was going to be the big retirement nest egg?
Oh, I don't know about that. I didn't actually meet Becky until 3 weeks after the trial.
Till after?
My wife, 3 weeks after the trial, my wife, like millions of people, were just glued to Court TV and they had trouble working. She decided to go with a colleague, Addie Strozier, to Walterboro to actually watch the trial. She had a chance meeting with Becky the day that the vans were leaving to go to Moselle. In fact, I remember what was said was that there was, Becky was actually making sure that people did not get pictures of the jury. That's how intent she was on that. And so Melissa mentioned to Becky, took a selfie and then reached her out, 3 weeks later and said, hey, do you mind if I use this in a coffee table book? And Becky said, this has been the trial of the century, and I'm thinking about it. I just don't know how to go about it. And so they brought me in as a colleague. I mean, my background has been in journalism for 30 years. I instantly liked her. And as you held up the book, Behind the Doors of Justice, you're right. No clerk of court has ever really written a book to just explain, just minute by minute, how intense a trial situation is and how reverent you have to be to the truth and to law. And
all of that is correct. I like the way he's explaining it. He is setting the duties and standards that she should know, and he probably learned from her. And what is most important? Truth, justice, fairness, the law. And we're all in agreement here. So she could have a very good explanation, be like, no, I may have done this or that, or I may have, smiled if Harpulian cracked a joke or whatever, just like everybody else. But I was not specifically singling somebody out and telling them to do this or telling them not to do this. Maybe they overheard me saying something to my assistant or what, or to the bailiff or whatever, but I would not do this directly to the jury. I think she could come out and have some explanation like that. She needs some explanation as to what these jurors are accusing her of doing, though, because again, if the allegations are true, that's incredibly problematic. And if people are talking about, the Facebook post and lying to the judge, if she lied to the judge, that's also problematic, not having candor with the court. Definitely could lose her job over that.
I got to tell you, you asked my reaction. I was pretty upset at what Harpulian said was the motivation that Becky had. Last time I checked, Simon & Schuster did not send us a check for $200,000. The Gordons and the Hills put up $30,000 of our own money because we felt this was an interesting story to tell. So right away, Vinny, for that to be motivation for her to get a book deal is completely false right there.
So again, shooting a hole right through one of the defense's theories that this was all done for money. He's like, well, it actually cost us money to put this book out. Now, I haven't heard anything about what the book sales are or anything like that, but it's not like they had some huge signing bonus for this book deal. And again, I think that's important. That's important because if she did get $1 million book deal, I think it would look even worse. So I think that's important that he pointed that out.
So what you just explained to me is that you're in the negative on this.
We self-published.
You self-published.
We self-published.
So that means you didn't get the big advance, none of that.
No.
Okay.
We advanced a check for $30,000. You know, you got attorney fees, you got to get set up on Amazon, you got to print so many copies, liability insurance, editors, you name it. But we felt it was a story that should be told. I mean, in my lifetime, I'm 59 years old. I don't know that there will ever be another trial like this. And it was my honor and pleasure to work with somebody with such integrity and character as someone like Becky Hill. Did you interact with her? I know that you were there.
I was there. I did not. Some of our staff had the opportunity to do that. And you said another trial like this in our lifetime. Well, we're hoping there's not going to be another one like this because that's what the defense wants, is an exact repeat of the trial. Obviously, they want a different ending to the whole thing. Have you spoken to Becky today after all of this has become public?
Very briefly, as you might imagine, she's had calls off the hook from media outlets. And as much as she'd like to make a statement, these allegations are so deep that she has hired counsel and they're going over them. But I am told they are going to put out a statement in the near future. And one thing I know about Becky Hill,
she's hired counsel. They're going to put out a statement in the near future.
She will answer each and every one of these allegations truthfully. She's one of the most genuine people I know, and it made me sick seeing this played out on national TV, and I just felt like I needed to speak out.
You know, and again, I prefaced everything today saying, if this is true, because
thank you,
because that's a big part of it, right? And the fact, I mean, she's been doing this for years, right? So I mean, she understands the rules and the role and everything else. So that's why I was so.
And so he even mentions that she understands the rules and the role and what she should do and what she shouldn't do. Because that's not too much of a leap or dot connecting with somebody with her experience. And another interview that she did, she said she was a court reporter for a long time before becoming a clerk. So she knows what she should and shouldn't do, what she can and can't do. And I think that's important. Ellen, yeah, it's legal for jurors to pray. Yes, it is. Beldy, were the restrictions on jurors during their deliberation only applied to this jury and this trial? This isn't this court's first murder trial. I agree. Those are unanswered questions that I want to know the answers to as well. Great questions. Maybe AM tampered with the jurors after trial. Absolutely. And I think that's why we need to have them come and testify. And I think the AG's office should be able to question them as well. Anna P., considering she knew it was wrong, aside from losing her job, are there any other consequences? If she knew it was wrong, actually, whether she knew it was wrong or not, if it's true what she did and tampered with the juror, there are different federal charges stemming from 5 years maximum sentence in prison all the way up to 20 years potentially. So yes, there are serious criminal charges that could come from these actions if they're true and proven, which is why it's a good idea that she hired counsel and is acting under the advice of counsel at this point. Cole, do you have any concern about the trend of jurors being like family? Not necessarily. I have some concern about jurors like changing their mind, or we talk about this, media pressure during the trial and while they're deliberating. What about the media pressure after trial? Are we going to have situations where jurors go and look at the media and they're like, oh crap, everybody's against us. I'm going to say there was some impropriety during the trial and have a new trial. I'm kind of worried about that. Muher, she needed to just sit and do her job, but she wanted the limelight. And thank you, Lexix.
Shocked by these allegations. Now, there were some strange things that happened during the course of this trial, including this whole Facebook controversy with juror, I think it was 758, who ended up getting kicked off. Was there any of that sort of drama? Because I have not read the book yet. I'll be honest with you. Okay, 100% honest. I've not read this book yet. Now everyone has to read it, right?
Vicky,
to figure out what the defense.
Vinny, I'm going to send you an autographed copy.
Oh, thank you. But is there anything in here about the juror who got bounced from the trial because of whatever was going on with the Facebook posts, with the ex-husband, et cetera?
Yes, there is. And what it all led to, and this I think is really the most important part of it in our book, is it led to Judge Newman, very unusual, calling the jury back in chambers and interviewing her, calling the juror rather, and interviewing her about the situation. And what he said, and he addressed this to the public and to the gallery, he said he felt that she was discussing the merits of the case, whatever way you want to go with it, with the outside public. And so the judge did decide to disqualify her and send her home.
And does Becky?
So again, and that is true. I rewatched that clip and he did say it had nothing to do with her ex-husband. Somebody said we need to get George in here. Well, I know what he says, and he is not happy about this and thinks absolutely a new trial, if any of this is true, if any of this is true, any of these statements, or she made any indication not to listen to the defense or that they were guilty. I mean, you got to understand, a lot of you guys follow trials and understand this process a lot more than your average juror. And the clerk of the court, if they start telling you stuff, it is really hard when you're in a situation and you don't know, and it's so important and it's so long and you're trying to do the right thing. And there are these skilled lawyers making arguments and you don't know who to believe. And everybody kind of sounds believable and is making, articulate statements that make sense and poking holes. But then when somebody you trust is like, don't listen to that crap. It's all baloney. He did it. This is all practiced. That can be a big deal, huge. So that's really, what I'd be worried about in this situation.
Was she discussing with Becky? Is that who she was speaking with?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. Apparently, and again, I'm not crystal clear on this, but
this is not sworn testimony tonight, Neil. You're not under oath. So just your best recollection.
Thank you.
We'll work tonight.
Thank you. Yeah, Vinny, there were apparently some Facebook posts that were out there allegedly by somebody who knew her and talking about the case in the community. That was enough for the judge to call the person in. And then after interviewing that juror, he decided that she should not be on the jury anymore. So the end result is the judge made the decision. And we didn't really cover much of, because Becky really didn't have any involvement in it that we discussed.
So Becky didn't have any involvement in it that we discussed. And Slater said, can you explain the Facebook situation as well as why AM would try to get into federal prison as opposed to state prison? Thanks for the video. So there was a Facebook post that basically said she'd been telling people about the case. It was taken down. Allegedly there was a post. It was taken down. Then there was an apology post by someone with the same name as her ex-husband. And Becky told the court about this. All of this is allegedly, okay? And the court had a problem with it. Then they talked to other people, and SLED went and talked to other people and said, hey, was the juror talking to you about this case? Calls the juror in, finds out Becky interrogated the juror, said he didn't like that. On the record, Judge Newman said that. But then, after talking to the other witnesses, he said, listen, they waffled a little bit talking with SLED, but I find that there's at least enough here that you are probably talking about some of the evidence in this case with other people. Therefore, we're going to have to remove you from this jury. Has nothing to do with the Facebook post or your ex-husband. And I think Judge Newman did that to protect potentially any impropriety of Becky's involvement in that situation with the Facebook post. That's kind of my guess with it. The difference between federal and state prison, I did a whole video on it. It was 2 videos ago when Murdaugh was pleading guilty to the federal charges. So for the deep dive, check that out. The short answer is federal prison is usually not as bad as state prison. Roxanne, maybe Alex Murdaugh has been tampering with the jury members after the trial. He's done a lot of shady things in jail since the end of this trial. You're not the first person to leave that comment. Animals, in my opinion, not money, but vanity. Overbroad, vigilante, civil servant. Could be.
So as we sit here tonight and you think about doing this project with Becky, you guys funded it yourselves. Are there any regrets? Anything like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done this, or, oh, we put stuff in here that could be problematic and could perhaps compromise the trial or compromise Becky?
Well, that's a fair question, Vinny. And obviously when we sat down, we decided that we wanted to share as much as we could with, and I should tell you, this was run through a media attorney. This was run through the Ethics Commission in the state of South.
So that's interesting. It was run through a media attorney and the Ethics Commission. So there's nothing ethically wrong or legally wrong with the clerk of court writing a book. And they obviously didn't think, after reading the book and running through it, that these problems would arise. So I think that, and again, maybe it's because this stuff didn't happen, but Becky didn't say any of this stuff to them. She didn't say anything to the attorney, I would assume. Like, I talked to the jurors, I convinced the jurors. So I think she's going to have that as her argument, is like, throughout this process, I talked to so many people. Never did I say I convinced the jurors or talked to the jurors. It didn't happen. So she may have that in her pocket. Also, 10,000 people again in the live. That's wild. Hit the like button. We crushed 10,000 likes on the last video, which was so fun and awesome. Hit that like button if you haven't already. Let's get it up to 10,000 again, please.
Carolina about even a clerk of court being allowed to write a book, an elected official. And they said, as long as, sealed documents aren't shared and as long as confidential information is not shared, it's okay. And so we went on that premise before we even started. And we carefully vetted this through media attorneys and editors. And we feel very good about it because it's not so much about the trial. You were there. You saw, and you can see the gallery, small town courthouse. It's like Mayberry, town square. The media is all out in front. People have an opportunity to come in and see this, almost an opportunity of a lifetime. People came from New York and other parts of the country just to see this. And it was wonderful to be able to share how when people work together for the common good to do the right thing, this can come off as, I think, a well thought of trial and how it was run. And that was really her job, was to run the courtroom. That's she's like the operations manager of the courtroom. And from what I could tell.
Right. Not to fight for justice or a conviction or anything like that, but to run the courtroom like an operations manager. Hot soup. If the hearing happens and substantiates the allegations, can she keep doing her elected position? My guess is she would be removed from office at that point. Lauren. I have done jury duty. It is so scary. Now knowing what I know, he was not guilty. I felt pressured to vote guilty. Okay. I'm assuming you're saying like you can understand how people get there. Nicholas or Nalas, sorry. If new trial, can they call the jurors to testify? No, they would not. They would not call the jurors to actually testify in a trial. They would be called during an evidentiary hearing to determine whether or not a new trial is necessary. Holden, what if this is all some convoluted marketing strategy for the book? I guarantee book sales have been up since this all happened, but I don't think so. Capelli said, we need a giveaway for 10,000 on a live. And Briella said, if we get to 10,000 likes, I'll gift more memberships. So it sounds like we've got our first gift, and maybe we will get some kind of, sponsored gift or something when there's 10,000 people on a live, because that is wild numbers wise. But right now, Briella Marie is going to be giving away memberships. So we'll leave this up here for the rest of this interview.
It seemed to me she did a very good job, and I'm proud to call her a friend, and I'm proud to co-author the book with her, and I'd write another one with her.
Well, I've got the
He'd write another one with her. I mean, a glowing report from him for sure. He believes her. He doesn't think she did anything wrong. They put it through a series of checks and confirmations that everything they were doing were above board and were fine. So to me, that's all a really important part of the process. But if we think of some other celebrities that wrote things that ended up getting published that they ran through attorneys, that doesn't mean it was always done right. It doesn't mean it was all legal. It doesn't mean it was all the way it was supposed to be done, and that there wasn't defamation or some other issue with the document that you ran through legal.
The title for the next one, Behind the Doors of Justice, and you follow how all of this sort of works its way through the whole system. Unbelievable. Neil Gordon, appreciate you coming on tonight. I always want both sides of every story, especially when one side is really loud with theirs. So I hope you'll come back as things develop.
I'd be honored to. And Vinny, thank you for being balanced on this and an opportunity to come on and share. And I hope you have a great rest of the program.
All right. Thanks so much. Neil Gordon joining us tonight. All right. Don't go anywhere. Up next.
All right. So we got to hear yesterday from the defense. We heard today from Becky. We heard today from Becky's co-author. And I think at the end of the day, there's still a lot of unanswered questions. There are still a lot of things we need to know. But to me, there is at least enough smoke to have the evidentiary hearing, put the jurors on the stand, put Becky on the stand if she will testify. I mean, maybe Judge Newman, as Harpootlian said, might have to be a witness. Let's figure out what happened, what the repercussions are, what the effect was, how far things were pushed, whether it was an under the breath comment or people looking at facial expressions saying, because I have actually seen this before, and clients have told me like, oh, this person did this to me. I'm like, oh, okay. And we get in depth and they're like, how do you know that? It's like, I could tell by the look in their eyes. So if they say stuff like, I could tell by the look in her eyes that she wanted us to vote guilty, that is not going to be enough. That is not going to be enough. So we're going to have to still see. And I think it needs to be dug into, just like the criminal defendant on the other side. I say, let's wait and see what's proven. Let them ask questions. Let them cross-examine witnesses. Let's hear both sides and then see what the conclusion is at the end of the day. Dee Dee, welcome to the membership crew. And could the case be thrown out and not retried? So no, this is not a situation where the verdict would be overturned and he would be acquitted. This would just be the trial wasn't fair and we need to do the trial again. And actually, my wife asked me yesterday, would he still be in jail pending the trial? And the answer would be yes. He would still be in jail pending the trial for all the same reasons he was in it before, but also because there's obviously enough evidence to hold him there, that there is enough evidence to at least over a probable cause standard that he's guilty of this crime, because there was a jury that in fact found him guilty. Shay, he said that he worked with her on a book for 6 months. It came out in August. Was that before the trial ended? I believe it was. I think she said 4 months. So I haven't put together the timeline, but it seems like there are some timeline issues in their statements. Ellen, we'll discuss church versus state on Moffitt on Money Saturday night at 7 p.m. Lororne, welcome to the crew. All right, just over an hour today. I appreciate so much. Yes, so Robin, check out our video from yesterday. The second half of the video, I read all of the affidavits and break down my thoughts on all of the affidavits. So check that out. And again, everybody hit that like button on your way out. Subscribe if you haven't already. We will keep paying attention to this. Send me anything you find on Instagram. Send it to me on Twitter. Maybe we'll read through the actual motion for new trial and read the legal arguments. We didn't do that yesterday because we didn't have time. We didn't have time today. But so many of you sent me these interviews, so I decided to hit that first. Animal said, no, not money or vanity. Misguided civic idealism. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I appreciate everyone for joining me. I'm out of here. Got to get back to work. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Tragos Law is our handle. And don't forget to listen to the Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.